Welcome to the Root Cause Revolution podcast with functional and integrative nurse nutritionist and energy medicine practitioner, Audrey Christie.
Hey friends, welcome to episode 280 of the Root Cause Revolution podcast. I can't believe we are wrapping up season 6. We're already approaching the end of 2023. Today I wanted to touch on something that we've talked about before, way back, almost over 100 episodes ago. But the question has come up numerous times in the questions that you guys submit for the Ask Audrey episodes, as well as in one-on-one client and patient relationships. So let's talk about antacids, about proton pump inhibitors, about all the things that we do to what we are assuming squelch the stomach acid that is happening in our body right now. Now, what you don't know, or what you may not know, what you may not realize, especially if you're new around here, is that if you are taking those things, if you take those things long term, let me put it that way, you will have long-term major with a capital M, major consequences. So if that's a surprise for you, I will do you one better. You have likely been misdiagnosed when you were placed on those to begin with. Absolutely. You were likely misdiagnosed. And I'll tell you why. So if you're new here, I'd like to take a minute to welcome you. I'm Audrey. I am a root cause clinician, and I help you to stop masking symptoms and start healing for good. Most of the time, I work with people who have tried it all and still aren't at the level of health and wellness that they desire. Maybe they feel like they're aging too fast, but we work together using a non-traditional approach, including naturopathy, nutrition, wellness, and energy medicine, and I help you to rebalance your body so it can heal for good. So if you're done with Band-Aids, ready for real solutions, I am here to help. All right, let's talk about antacid medication, proton pump inhibitors. So you may not know this, but those are not actually for heartburn and acid reflux, right? In fact, proton pump inhibitors specifically, they only have one appropriate indication, and that is for Helicobacter pylori. That is an infection, right? They are indicated for erosive esophagitis. They are indicated for gastric ulcers, and they are indicated for stress ulcer prevention only in high-risk critically ill patients. So think about, do you take these medications? And do you fit into one of those categories, right? So we're talking about medications like Nexium. We're talking about medications like Prilosec. We are talking about even over-the-counter, well, those are all over-the-counter these days, but even things like Tums, right? Those calcium chalky chews that you want to eat after you've had a spicy meal. See, these drugs are crazy profitable for the drug companies that produce them. People spend about $13 billion with a B dollars a year on these acid stopping medications. Now, interestingly, it's really very difficult to estimate how many people actually suffer from gastric reflux or from GERDs, because there are both the prescription and the over-the-counter medications for it. And so we're going to talk about why we shouldn't be taking these drugs. But we also want to talk about what to do about reflux, because I totally understand. Reflux is serious. It hurts, but it has real consequences: scarring, constriction, ulceration, even esophageal cancer, IBS, and lots of other digestive issues. Okay? So let's start with the daily use of these things, right? So the daily use of proton pump inhibitors, of antacids, frequently shows up as the root cause of a diagnosable disease, right? And I meet people every day, met people last week that still use these medications, either the over-the-counter or the prescription version, every single day, and have for decades. And this happens courtesy of the marketing that is used for these medications, marketing it both to physicians and to the public. It's widely believed that acid reflux is caused by too much stomach acid. Listen closely. That is simply false. 100% false. There is not an iota of truth to acid reflux being caused by too much stomach acid. Numerous studies have shown without a shadow of a doubt that GERD is not too much stomach acid. In fact, it is exactly the opposite. But what happens is that we see the commercial and then we kind of use these drugs. I always say we use them like wet naps, right? It goes something like, I'm going to have this massive pile of barbecue. Let me grab a wet nap and some Tums because I know I'm going to be messy and I know it's going to give me heartburn, right? It is baked into our thinking. It's baked into our habits. It's like Kleenex, right? We think we have to have this little chalky med or this little pill to stop the feedback that our body isn't enjoying the same food that our brain is, right? It's our body waving a flag and saying, hey, something's not right. And when we do that, what we're doing is masking and ignoring those symptoms. And so the body is prevented from thriving. And in fact, it just stirs up and makes for a more intense and serious problem. So again, I'm not denying the symptoms of GERD and heartburn are painful and serious, and they are caused by acid refluxing up into the esophagus. And I'm not arguing that taking the medications doesn't relieve the symptoms that you're experiencing, but it makes the cause of the condition worse, which means that you will either need the prescription or over-the-counter medication for your entire life, or you will gradually need additional medications because you will create disease processes in your body. It's kind of a neat strategy for the drug companies, right? If you don't know this, you know this now, cures are not profitable, right? So the way Tums and proton pump inhibitors work is not complicated at all. Proton pump inhibitors work by a very simple mechanism, and it actually stops the acid pumps in the stomach from producing more acid. Antacids work in a different way, but that's kind of the same net effect. They reduce the effect of the acid. So both types of drugs make the contents of the gastric cavity, your stomach, less acidic, makes it a higher pH, so that when it bubbles up into the esophagus, you don't notice. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt much, if at all. So when you have a more alkaline environment in your stomach, the digestive enzyme called pepsin that is found in the stomach is not able to have as an erosive effect on the lower esophageal sphincter and the esophagus itself. The problem is that when we neutralize or lower stomach acid, you are stopping your digestion. You're completely stopping your digestion. You're still not treating the root cause of what's causing the stomach acids. Our bodies, our stomach cavities were designed to have really nice, strong acidic juices because it's a requirement in order to be able to completely digest our food. In order to break our food down into those critical amino acids that we need to run our body, you have to have strong acidic gastric juices. Otherwise, you can have the best diet in the world. You can be eating super healthy. You can be doing all the right things, but your body can't put it to use because it doesn't come into the intestines and it's not processed down to the right size molecule for your body to use. So what happens is we use these proton pump inhibitors, these antacids, we create a really weak environment in our digestive tract in our stomach. And so you become vulnerable to all of these different nutrient deficiencies, right? Essential amino acids, right? Because that's the example that I use, but also key minerals, also fat and water soluble vitamins. The B vitamins in particular tend to take a big hit. With extended use of these medications, whether it's over the counter or prescribed, you will end up in a deficiency of vitamin B12, right? Because good, strong stomach acid triggers a series of reactions that allows B12 to be absorbed. And without the stomach acid, we aren't able to absorb the B12. And then you have a whole cascade of energy and fatigue that shows up even more troubles. Now, what will then happen is the doctor will say, well, then take a B12 supplement, right? But that can, sometimes that can help. And if you're doing B12 injections, that can certainly increase your serum B12 level, but it doesn't take care of that underlying root cause, that underlying anemia. It doesn't fix the problem. It just puts a Band-Aid over it. So not only are the nutrients that we are able to absorb impacted, also, your immune function is impacted with these issues. In particular, ongoing proton pump inhibitors or antacids usage leads us to low levels of magnesium and zinc, which impacts insulin resistance, can lead to diabetes, ultimately heart disease, even if you don't make a pit stop in diabetes before you get there. And so these are all really good examples of how sometimes you might be eating a super nutrient-rich diet, but if you don't appropriately digest and absorb and convert those into the nutrients that can actually get past the cell membrane in your body, it doesn't really matter what you ate, right? So PPIs and antacids, I'll get it out in a minute, are a great example of what happens when short-term medication designed to briefly let the stomach heal is used long-term and off-label. You end up with these big consequences. Now, a lot of people want to know, well, Audrey, if it's not my stomach acid is too strong, then what is causing my reflux? Well, it could be a couple of different things. Most often it is something called IAP, or intra-abdominal pressure, right? And that has its roots in gut dysfunction and further in low stomach acid. So a lot of people are like, what? Low stomach acid is my problem? And yes, that is the absolute opposite of what you're being sold here. And it's not hard to find literature to prove it. Just a brief stop in PubMed will prove it. And I have 5 studies just linked here in my notes that I can share with you on that topic. Let's think about one aspect of this, right? We know that stomach acid declines as we age. It's said that after about 40 to 50 years old, you ought to be taking digestive enzymes with your meals for that very reason. We also know that the prescription of these acid alkalizing and acid blocking medications increases as we age. You can just look at the data. There's more usage of these products in the population as we grow older. Now, if it were too much acid problem, then wouldn't every teenager in the world need antacids and proton pump inhibitors and all of those things, rather than the adults and the elderly, right? Pretty easy when you think about it that way. And again, just because these drugs are available over the counter does not mean that they are safe for long-term use, and that's another common misconception. If you look at the box, usually these things will say use for 4 to 7 days, use for 7 to 10 days, use for 3 days, and call your doctor. So it's not just a problem with the medication itself, but our access to the medication and the overprescription of the medication that allows us to really jump in there. So I put this class together many, many moons ago, but it is a quick class on how to get off of your proton pump inhibitors. It has worked for hundreds of clients over the years since it came out. It hasn't changed a bit today, so I am going to send you, if you're on my email list, a little link if you want to grab that class for 50% off between now and the end of the year. Now and the end of the year is when we're all going to be bellying up to the table and getting our antacids ready, right? So I want you to work towards not being on that medication and see what else opens up for you. I've had tons of people. One of my favorite clients started off on proton pump inhibitors, had been taking them for over a decade, and was able to get off using this exact same system. So if you're not on my newsletter list, you can jump on there at audreychristie.com/newsletter. I'll have that linked in the show notes for you. And I will be back on Friday with an Ask Audrey episode. Remember, friend, I'm always rooting for you. See you then.
Thank you for listening to the Root Cause Revolution podcast. Be sure and subscribe on your favorite podcast provider. Ratings and reviews are always appreciated.